What you're telling me is that music is about to stop, and we're going to be left holding the biggest bag of odorous excrement ever assembled in the history of capitalism. 1974, 1987, 92, 97, 2000, and whatever we want to call this. It's all just the same thing over and over. We can't help ourselves.
I say when we sell. Hey, I say when we sell.
This week we're joined by Jeff Booth. Here's a quick sneak peek into what we discussed during the conversation. We discussed what does it look like to transition from a debt-based fiat financial system to a free market driven by deflation and technology. Why individuals and businesses need Bitcoin for survival and to make it into the next system. What can we discern from the US government's interest in Bitcoin this year? What about other countries? What about gold? What does this tell us about the current system and the transition to a Bitcoin standard? Is AI a productivity miracle, as many make it out to be, or does it actually make the debt problem worse for the United States and other countries? We discussed this and more during the episode, and if you're an individual or a business that already has begun to shift your energy and time to a better form of money in Bitcoin, then OnRamp is here to protect it and provide you with peace of mind. On a secure foundation of multi-institution custody with inheritance insurance and access to financial services like loans, you can be confident knowing that your family or business can make it to the other side of this paradigm shift from the fiat monetary system to a Bitcoin standard. So thank you again for tuning in to this episode and hope you enjoy it as much as I did. It's the last trade. We're joined this week by Jeff Booth. Jeff, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks, Jackson. Great to see you again.
Yeah, it's been a while. And of course, joined by my co-hosts Brian and Michael from OnRamp. And so for those who are not familiar with Jeff, Jeff is an entrepreneur, technology leader. He's a partner at Ego Death Capital and author of The Price of Tomorrow, which I would say, if you have not read that book, it has to be up there for me, certainly in my top 3 favorite Bitcoin-related books. It's really a macro masterclass. And Jeff, would love to start there because it's been 5 years since you published the book, believe it or not. And I would love to just get your take on how things have progressed. Is it in line with your expectations? Have things evolved a little bit differently than you expected? I said right before we hit record here that we've added a lot more debt in the past 5 years. And the advancement of technology is just continuing to evolve more and more rapidly. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's actually been 6 years or almost 6 years since the book came out, and I think the model that the book laid out is exactly what's happened. In Price of Tomorrow, why deflation is key to an abundant future. I made the case that the free markets were deflationary. Right, the natural state of the free market is deflation because we compete against each other to provide more value, and we only use the things that provide us more value. And so the output of that has to be deflation. And the ideas that essentially broadly are in technology are all ideas in our head that then we encode into more information to make the world more productive. And that would be moving exponentially because all of those ideas sit on top of past ideas and make it better and better and better. And we go faster and faster and faster on that. And so if the natural state of the free market is deflation, and technology is moving at that rate because we're competing on more and more value, then you'd expect exponential deflation. You expect the entire world to live in abundance through that process. But the other side that I explored in that book is that would not be allowed from a debt-based system because the debt-based system couldn't allow deflation. Or it would collapse. And so we, by measuring within the debt-based system, would blame each other while we were active participants in that debt-based system. We would be ripped apart inside the control system as the offset from the deflation that should flow broadly to society from a free market is captured by very few people on top, and all the rules change to keep that capture. All the laws change to keep that capture. So so the paradigm that I talked about in the book is playing out exactly as I would have projected. I don't know if you remember this, but in the book I talked about the preceding 20 years. Kind of the smoking gun knowing I was right was in from the year 1999 to 2019, we had an increase of $185 trillion of debt to grow the global economy by 46 trillion. So at that time, there was, in almost the entire history, you had a buildup of debt to about 60 trillion. Then you added 185 trillion in 20 years. But I made the case that's not what I was worried about. What I was worried about is because of all the manipulation of money and because people are living on this, and there always be an excuse to make more debt because we wouldn't allow the system to fail from that. As productivity expanded, that debt must expand exponentially. So I just looked at the numbers recently. And so we're 6 years later from the writing of my book. And now the global debt is 650 trillion. Yeah. And the numbers are just nonsensical, right? So remember, if that global debt is 650 trillion and the entire asset base of the world is 1 quadrillion or 900 trillion, every asset in the world is tethered to that debt, that liability. So if it's insolvent, all the assets are zero. That's why no one will let that debt fall. No one, you won't, no one will, and no government will. So they'll continue to manipulate money, which is the continuation of coercion and control and centralization, and very few people making decisions for everybody else to steal the wealth that should flow naturally in a free market. What else does it mean? It means we've never lived in a global free market, but we believe we have. And we're measuring essentially most people are measuring what's happening in Bitcoin from the other system, strengthening the other system's hold over them by thinking they're getting rich in Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't going up, all prices are falling against it.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating thesis that's obviously correct, and I would posit that the only individual or type of individual that could have come to it is an entrepreneur, because what you explain, you feel viscerally. Like an academic or somebody that is working for somebody doesn't feel it innately, but this is just the status of how a free market works. And there's a couple themes. One is I forget the CEO of Citadel, but Citadel Securities, he has a book that he gave everyone forever. It was called "Are You Playing to Win or Are You Playing to Play?" And it's the same idea of it. It's called hardball, and it looks like from the outside, well, that's pretty kind of cutthroat. But the reality is, it's a moral imperative to play to win, because to your point, that's how you thrive and you grow as a society. And I didn't expect to share this, but this will be an interesting anecdote for you. Is my background was in traditional tech at the Googles. I was actually at WeWork with Adam Newman lighting money on fire while I was going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And then I came into the Bitcoin space and was building products and services. But I saw venture capital and really ultimately loose monetary policy and liquidity drown all the soundness of unit economics and business decision making. And so when I left those firms, I was scared shitless of ruining this business. So I built it with my own money with Bitcoin. And that's how you get to the most discerning, efficient outcomes on hiring to using, leveraging AI tools. And it's worked exponentially because you're working, not only the price of Bitcoin's going up, but you have the hurdle rate or the discernment of the cost of capital in your favor if you understand it. And so you get to run laps around everyone else, because to your point, it's just in the congruence with like the way the world is supposed to go, while everything else is becoming more expensive and people are getting more inefficient. In this world, if you step outside, you get a lot more efficient.
Yeah, that's what's happening in every one of our portfolio companies. Typically, what ends up happening is when I used to invest in kind of same areas that you were talking about, the misallocated capital was so staggering based on a simple assumption: get big really fast on a network effect, so that with broken money, that you win it all, and everybody's and this new system. And so in that system, you'd have seed, pre-seed, seed, series A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And you'd go public and the companies still, like Uber, still weren't profitable, right? And after spending tens of billions of dollars to be able to build a brand, all based on if I get there, there's going to be no competition. I own it all, right? And it worked largely for Google, Facebook, Amazon, and their cost of capital was so low that it also prevented anybody else from playing the same game. So, and then they remove their labor. You still use the thing, and they suck out all, and so even the entire market, if you're not investing in those companies, you're getting killed because you're in the other companies. But in Bitcoin, it looks totally different. It looks totally different. And out of all the companies we funded, not one has failed yet. There's 3 companies that are already profitable, growing crazy in Bitcoin, adding Bitcoin to their balance sheet each month at growth rates that are unbelievable, that didn't require any more capital. And so you've got, in some cases, you're going from pre-seed or seed to profits at that growth rate, and adding Bitcoin to the balance sheet each month. So it's a trade that it's unbelievable that more people don't know about it. And why would that trade exist? Because when you know something that no one else knows, and you've gone down to the sand on it, like most Bitcoiners have, and you move your time into creating more value, what you're really doing is the market is most people are stuck in the other control system, and they're providing rails for people to get out of the control system into a different thing, and they have so much knowledge on that and know how to run their balance sheets that essentially it's a perfect expression of the free market on giving value to people who don't know it yet. And the more value you give, the faster you grow. It's so simple. So you find people moving more and more of their time to this new system, and the people that move more of their time to this new system are giving more value to it. If your business is successful, Michael, that's what you're doing, right? You're solving a problem that exists in the market for people to understand this. And if you keep doing that and keep doing that better than anyone else, your business will be successful because you've helped people.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I think what's interesting in that model is there's a component of the filter, because when you understand Bitcoin, it helps you see the world for what it is and not what you want it to be. So it allows for, independent of the capital appreciation, you have a better lens of everyone else. But then the other aspect ties into the notion of when those individuals have the Bitcoin, even if and you would probably make the same case, but most wouldn't. Like if you gave yourself $1 million versus 100 million, $1 million in BTC, and you gave it a competitor $100 million in dollars, maybe 100's a lot, but 10 million on a relative time frame, maybe the more capital is just a longer time frame, you're going to run circles around them because you're just going to build the right foundation. You're going to counter position. But that's not a common theme. So to your point, and we did this case study with like WeWork, if they would have taken the money and put it in BTC, and they would have effectively own all the real estate, right? They would have had the better model, because it's a common trope. It's like, I need Silicon Valley money, I need all these things to win. It's like you actually don't. It's like once you understand, you can counter position the market, and maybe you may have to take different trade-offs or different ways to fundamentally build, but they will just have better first principles basis in unit economics. And on the other side of that, you'll have a foundational ecosystem versus built on like quicksand effectively.
Exactly. And the knowledge that we're talking about right now is so thinly known, right? It's just not widely known, even from a bunch of Bitcoiners. They're still operating in the mindset of the fiat world. And so if you again, that's how markets work. Markets work by having a different point of view than everybody else, being right, and so that's why I constantly say, if Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, which I suspect it does because of our agency within it, then if it stays decentralized and secure, it doesn't care what Silicon Valley is doing. It doesn't care what Elon's doing. It doesn't care about any of these things. It's repricing all of it. It's just repricing the world to this monetary standard And that is the energy-backed system that's decentralized and secure is an objective reality of the free market working. Whereas the other world that everybody's living in is a belief structure based on somebody else gets to control you.
Yeah,
It's really that simple.
I'm curious if you think that belief structure is eroding, or if there's any shift in perception broadly, call it over the past 6 years since you wrote the book. I think I could point to a few different sort of signposts of the shifting of the Overton window, sort of these concepts being more in the zeitgeist. I think one big one was in 22, the seizure of Russia's treasuries, which was a really eye-opening moment, I think, for a lot of folks around this concept of the risk-free rate, treasuries being risk-free. And if you say something we don't like, then it's no longer your asset. So there's clearly risk embedded in treasuries and government debt in general. I think that was a big one. And then I'm even looking at the past 6 to 12 months in terms of, we don't like to read too much into the tea leaves because it's mostly nonsense that comes from the Fed, and there's always been sort of a fallacy around Fed independence. But I think that that's even more sort of in the fore now around just the pressure from the administration to cut rates and firing of certain governors. Do you think that there is a shift in the broader zeitgeist around this, recognizing the concepts that you wrote about 6 years ago?
In the broader context, no. I don't. Every one of those things you just described have people trying to resolve the paradox from the system creating the problem, and the problem's getting worse. So just use an example of Elon Musk. We're going to cut $2 trillion out of spending. If they cut $2 trillion of spending, you would have jammed a deflationary spiral immediately, and it would have started unwinding, which at the time would have caused banks to fail, supply chains to fail, houses to just collapse and keep on collapsing until such time that the voters said, print everything you can. Right? So we believe it's somebody else. Right? And how many people on both sides of that conversation, I'm just using this one conversation as an example, were cheering Elon or somebody else or Trump or this, still caught inside the system that's creating all the pain. And nothing changed. That goes up because it has to go up. Because if it doesn't, you're going into deflationary spiral from a credit-based system that can't allow a deflationary spiral. So it's completely mathematical, illogical to measure from that system or listen to anything in that system. But it captures us. It captures our attention through fear and ego, and we want somebody else to be able to solve the problem from there, and we just keep making it stronger at our own demise. Right. So a broad-based understanding of this. This is also why we're so crazy early, because there's not a broad-based understanding of this. I don't think there's a broad-based understanding of this on this call, right? And I don't mean to poke
yeah, Jackson's a little slower, so he.
but I'm just positing something that this is so we wouldn't have the mental model to be able to hold on to these thoughts because 5,000 years of human history have gone through a different model, and what we do is we take new information and we try to make our existing model accurate. But these are two fundamentally different models. The natural state of the free market is deflation, meaning you've never lived there. You have no model for it, right? And so it's so easy to grab on these news events and try to attach Bitcoin to the existing system.
It's 100% right. It's healthy friction. We have my background was not in traditional finance. Brian, in particular, had 10 plus years at Brown Brothers Harriman, a private bank, and we naturally talk about these things because it's very hard for me to acknowledge Fed speak because it's so much noise you can feel when you think about just inflation in general. And to your point, I've heard you speak about like living outside the system. It's very hard for people to think about. It's very similar to like good and evil. Most people don't want to acknowledge it. They like to chime it up to incompetence because it's very hard to acknowledge like a different system. Like, what does that mean? But to your point is where we're going is it has to be built from the ground up, or it goes back to like zero to one, and Peter Thiel references if the foundation is cracked in any endeavor, whether it's a relationship, a personal relationship, all the way to a company, the whole thing will permeate at a certain point. And so that's what we're talking about here. There is no fixing anything that currently exists. Even if you insert Bitcoin to like slow that down, ultimately somebody will step in to Jeff's point with first principle understanding, and they will outrun at that basis. And so, to your point, there's a different levels of spectrum of this, and nobody fully knows it. But there's like intuition, there's reps, and then there's natural, just like first principles thinking and looking at. The craziest part is all this has been. We're in an anomaly, right? For thousands of years, this is how the world had generally operated on a gold standard or some subset of it, and we're kind of just going to run that back, but have to like reconstitute everything.
Mind you, Michael, even if you push on that, and let's just like debate that piece, I think for thousands of years, we've always lived in a zero-sum game. And we're used to zero-sum games. Somebody had to lose for us to win, and we would invade another country, take their gold, put them in slavery, and it would look like the country that did that was winning. But somebody had to lose for us to win. The free market is a different game, right? So that wasn't a free market. It was imposing slavery on somebody else because of a war machine that allowed you to do that. And you'd extract gold in that case to be able to do it, or you would invade and go to war all over the world to be able to keep your structure. Inside the structure, at the top of it, just like a fiat system, at the top of it looks like you're winning. But everybody's losing in that zero-sum game. Because eventually the system fails under its own weight. Because when people are so persecuted for so long, they rise up and overtake people. You can't build walls high enough, right? When a whole bunch of the population. Now we've just repeated that zero-sum game through a financial engineering and through a monetary system that imposes it around the world. It looks exactly the same. Going back to gold wouldn't solve it because gold gets centralized. And we play a zero-sum game to steal somebody else's gold or cheat gold because we can't audit it all the time. So that can't resolve this paradox. But the free market is an infinite game. Add more people that compete to provide value to you. You get wealthier. That it is such a different. So if we've always lived in the zero-sum game where you could exploit people to be able to, our consciousness in describing what this changes from that game would obviously look like this, that a whole bunch of people would be stuck in that model trying to exploit that game. And the free market's a completely different game. It's an infinite game. Everyone wins.
So could we play out, Jeff, then the transition period between these two? So between a true free market system that you're describing and then the system of exploitation, the fiat monetary system, like how do you kind of see this playing out over the longer term in terms of these two competing forces with technology-driven deflation against the ever-compounding inflation of the monetary system? Maybe we'll start there. I have other thoughts and ideas, but that's a big question to start with.
Yeah, it's a big question, and again, there's layers of this. At the highest level, you can imagine it's going to be massively chaotic because it's not driven. It's actually driven by us, our own agency, and what system we're giving more energy to. So if we say we're Bitcoiners and we're giving all our energy to the fiat system through kind of the fear, coercion, everything, it's just a system. It's not bad people, but there's the same people in both systems that don't know this, right? They're trying to resolve a problem and they're so convinced they can resolve the problem in their way from the system causing the problem. Ask yourself a really simple question. Is there anything in the world, the biggest problem that you can think of, that could be solved by manipulating money more? Every problem gets worse, right? And but that's all news cycle, the entire news cycle, and everybody's living it and spending their money in that system. And so you have to ask yourself, what would that system that gains its control from our fear and coercion within it do to try to stop Bitcoin that gave our agency back to us? And you can see from that very simple that moves to this infinite game. And so our energy within that system that makes it more stronger. So it's actually the change in us, moving our time and energy into the new system completely, spending in it, saving in it, helping others understand it. It's that change that is the change in the world. So instead of that saying, what does it look like now, or how does it look? How fast are individual people going to make that change? Right, and I think the answer is individual people is going to make that change very slowly.
I certainly agree with that. I'm always surprised, I think, year after year, just how slow adoption, especially with the idea of how, at least I've perceived, S-curves and how technology is adopted. It still feels like we're in that period before the really big run-up of adoption of Bitcoin. And it's just shocking year after year how little people have actually tried to address the root cause of this issue. Like, one of the things that I've always thought is a great analogy is Plato's allegory of the cave, right? And so you have people that are just looking at shadows on the wall and perceiving that to be their reality, but kind of on the backside of that, you have these two parties that are effectively one party, both involved in manipulating the money. But then you have, to your point, it gets more and more chaotic because the money continues to break and break further. And this has so many downstream consequences to everything, right? Every single way we interact on a day-to-day basis.
When I say that, and I had to face the same thing in myself, it's easy to tell yourself a lie when your ego won't let you. So, and for me, when I moved my time completely into Bitcoin, started ego death, was myself going through a lie that I told myself. I wrote a book on this. I talked all over the world about Bitcoin, and the truth is, at that time, I had a hedge. Most of my time, 95% of my energy was in the existing system. That's where I made all my money, and I put it into Bitcoin. And it wasn't until I woke up one night and went, wow, this is hard, because it's hard. I wanted to believe that thing that I needed to do this to buy more Bitcoin. It wasn't until I realized the hypocrisy in my actions that 90%, 95% of my energy was making the world worse, unsafe for my kids, when I could just move my energy into the new system and create something else in the new system that was aligned with where I wanted to go. And I wouldn't have seen all of the incredible entrepreneurs and all of what's happening, and they might not have found me had I not moved my energy. So by doing so you start to bend reality into a different world. And I couldn't. It's almost impossible to describe how rewarding that has been.
Yeah,
because my old belief system wouldn't have believed it.
I really empathize with a lot of that because I was similar to yourself, not as nearly successful, but it was in that space and in the traditional tech space, and I felt the pull and the golden handcuffs, and I always got scared, so I'd always leave. And I jumped in the space full time in 2020, almost through some coercion. Parker Lewis is a very persistent individual. I was one of the first early folks to help build out Unchained. And I just naturally, as one does, you want to provide value because you remember how hard it was to come into the space. So you talk to everyone, all of our clients at the time there and here, it's like they're friends and family. And I say it right when they jump on the call. It's like we just provide frameworks. It's the right thing to do. And you said something early about if you deliver value, you're going to make money. And it's something I've always held deeply in this space is if you deliver value from, hiring for 5 years, seeing that visceral change when somebody's able to put all of their energy, the people I've hired at Unchained that weren't salespeople, but are world-class salespeople once their energy is directed into something they're passionate about. And you get to do that for years. And one of the things that Brian and I talk about, because we have a venture fund and I say we're value investors, but not value investors. Like obviously, to make money, you need to buy at the right value in general, but we're value investors in that we invest in things that produce value for the world. So I won't touch anything related to prediction markets or gambling because I don't think it provides value to the world. But when you start thinking about what are the things that fundamentally help the world, you cannot help but make money, especially if it's in a Bitcoin centric way. And so to your point, you can't even really feel it until you're in it, like you're describing, that the world just starts to open up and it may feel it in the short run. It's the common trope of hard decisions, easy life, easy decisions, hard life. It may like not feel like you're taking a step back, but you're actually maybe taking a notable and from an optics in a fiat world step back, but you're going 100x forward. But a lot of people can't do that because they have the house, the wife working remote or at home. And so you get to really see the difference, and the people that are willing to take that leap just kind of completely change everything about their life and the people around them.
I look at it around the Bitcoin community and the people that today are well known, doing extraordinarily well, that I knew back 5-6 years ago, that made the same move 5-6 years ago. And people look at them and, well, how did they do that? And all they did is move their time, just like I did. And it's just it's wild to watch. It's exciting to watch because it's actually the way this world should look. Right? Provide value to other people. You do well by providing value in a protocol that heals the world.
I would imagine with that, I don't know if this is a good transition point, Jackson, but you're probably a little bearish. I'm personally, I think a lot of our team on the digital asset treasury deal. And the reason why I would say that, and maybe you can clarify if you're not, is because it's basically it's an embodiment of what you're describing, the fiat world trying to like insert its value into Bitcoin. And it's just inherently a flawed construct that will ultimately not work out.
Yeah, I guess I want to be careful of that because I think Michael Saylor did a really great job and some leverage on this on an asset like this. If you really borrowed Pierre Rochard's playbook, right, from 2014, and I think that there can be winners in that as long as you don't get over your skis, but there's also going to be a massive amount of broken bodies that are all in the same trade. It might push Bitcoin up in the short term, all levered plays for a while, but then on the other side, as Bitcoin falls, or like just essentially the animal spirits of markets. Right? The zero sum, everybody wanting to beat somebody else just races everybody into the same type of trade, where then it capitulates at some point and falls on itself. And so I don't see a lot of, when I look around at these companies, I don't see a lot of companies that could withstand that, what that looks like. So you can expect a whole bunch of broken bodies on the way through, which might provide an opportunity. Again, this is going to distribute Bitcoin. It's going to distribute Bitcoin to a whole bunch more people that are value investors that understand the longer term play and what we're playing. The other thing is, if the market entirely looked like that, if everything in Bitcoin was that, then it would be a centralizing function in a world where people believed that inflation was required to where they'd be essentially making a trade there that would centralize Bitcoin. Not everyone will do that. And that system will have to come and attack Bitcoin at some point. And when it tries to attack Bitcoin and the nodes don't move, then that system might go to zero. Right. So if you just play through, again, these are fundamentally not bad people, or just people making decisions in each thing, but they're fundamentally incompatible. An inflationary monetary system cannot coexist with the free market. And it feels like it can in the beginning, and then as it gets worse and worse, as it has to steal more, it has to coerce more. It has to change laws to enshrine power. It has to, and it gets worse and worse and worse until fundamentally it breaks. Right? But those systems cannot coexist. So whatever system you then from that question, first you'd go, is what Jeff just said true? Right? Go as deep as you want to, if that's true, because what you'll get to is, no, I believe the free market can't exist, so somebody needs to control this for these people, and then that expands. Right? but fundamentally, if you understand that from first principles, that they can't coexist, a true free market, then it means we've never lived in one globally. We've never experienced one. We don't know what it looks like, and you can expect all of what's coming in this fight, chaos, and everything else. And you don't have to play it. You could just be in the free market. Go and self-custody in Bitcoin. Add value. Understand how to add, and you're immune from all of the chaos.
Did you know that there's been hundreds of billions of dollars of losses due to poor custody? It's remarkable. I mean, Bitcoin's only a $2 trillion asset, yet we're sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars of losses. I mean, that is something that is unique to this asset class and really a testament to how early we are and how challenging it's been to protect Bitcoin for the long haul. So that's why at OnRamp we pioneered multi-institution custody. And one of the latest product features that we've launched is OnRamp Guardian. Think about Guardian as additional controls and verifications on your account to protect you, your family, your Bitcoin wealth against various types of digital and physical threats. The thing here is, as Bitcoin continues to appreciate, there are both good things about that and bad things. And so you can only imagine the amount of awareness around the asset as Bitcoin goes from 100,000 to 150 to 200 and so on. And so you just want to make sure that you're ahead of the curve here. I found you never really want to be in a position where you're rushing to make changes to your custody setup, or you're rushing to make sure that your family has an inheritance plan. Best to get ahead of that. And so OnRamp Guardian is really just another component of our solution here to ultimately provide you with peace of mind, whether it's for you and your family or it's for your business. We're here to help. So if you want to reach out, onrampbitcoin.com, you can schedule a consultation there, or you could also reach out to me at Jackson@onrampbitcoin.com. Thank you. Yeah, I'm curious, Jeff, for you, but really for Brian and Michael as well, just in the nature of this conversation, right? With these two systems that you've described in your book and on this conversation today, how do you start to think about nation state adoption, or even within the United States, right? There are states that seem to be a little bit more on the forefront with adopting Bitcoin as a strategic asset, Texas being one of them, but there are a few. Because to your point, I mean, these systems don't coexist, or at least they don't coexist at the end of this journey that we're on. But in the meantime, how do you perceive, for instance, in the U.S. this year, the Trump administration has taken a keen interest in, let's say, Bitcoin, crypto, stable coins, right? It's certainly not maybe the Bitcoin ethos that the four of us look to embody on a day-to-day basis, but it's more than the previous administration or more than the first Trump administration, right? So you're having what seems to be at least some embrace by government, but is that ultimately a positive and negative, or is this a crucial part, or is this a requirement in terms of the transition from one system to another?
All of the above. It would look, if the system that we're describing, by the way, and I say if, it absolutely is. We live in a system that's a zero-sum game that's based on manipulation of money. And we're moving to a system that's an infinite game based on no manipulation of money, assuming Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure. So if you were a government, if you were saying, imagine the power that comes unjustly from stealing your energy to accrue to government power, and how much bigger government has got over the last 100 years. Right? More and more infrastructure, more and more people telling you what to do, more and more away from the free market, more and more and more, because it has to. It's a function of it. More and more three-letter agencies with their own different ideas on how to control people, and through AI and control, and most people believing kind of the narrative that's fed to them. What would those agencies do, and what would the governments do all over the world, and it's not just the US, but all of governments all over the world, if for 16 years they tried to kill something that couldn't be killed? What would they do? What would you do if you were to be part of it? Wouldn't you try to co-opt it?
Yep.
Wouldn't you try to? And so you have to look through all of this and see kind of the actions that are playing forward right now. Of course, they would look like this. Of course, people would look at this, and it's not bad people. It's just a different knowledge, all different knowledge of what I'm saying. What was the first thing you did when many people, when they first understood Bitcoin? I want to buy as much as I can, right? That's what many governments are going to do. And by buying as much as you can, if you're thinking like that, then your citizens are richer later on, right? So just as it works for you personally, it works the same as the government. If that's the end goal, and if it's the end goal, then you realize also that government has to get way smaller in service of society against that, right? And it heals as it gets smaller and smaller, and the free market works. Each different state would have the same thing. Or you could say, I'm going to control enough of this that then I'm going to change the rules, or try to change the rules. And I could take my US dollar from a gold reserve, change the rules to a petrodollar reserve, change the rules to a Bitcoin reserve. And all of those things would also play out by different actors within the system having different motivations within the system.
Yeah. I think the thing where we think about timelines, the only one that I can credibly even put a pulse on is really generational timelines. When you think about individuals aging out and an individual being born into a world that Bitcoin exists, and it's still, you can make the case. I think the case is that Bitcoin doesn't really exist in the sense of these concepts we're talking about. So you have to they have to permeate society for a generation, multiple generations before you get to the other side. So this might be over 100-year thing when you really extrapolate. It's not a 10 to 20-year Bitcoin, takes, gold's market cap and it does its thing. This is a socioeconomic facet that people's brains have to be rewired, and they generally can't be. And so they have to just naturally, drift off.
Yeah, to just building on that point, if you're measuring fiat and Bitcoin goes to $10 million, many of the Bitcoiners today won't be Bitcoiners. They'll sell back into the system, and they were always measuring in fiat, right? And that'll distribute Bitcoin to a whole bunch of other people who have the same choice to make, and the same thing will happen to $100 million. And I'm using fiat dollars as an example, just as a reference point. But yeah, so it's really us that's changing. Okay. This is imposing a new model for reality that's aligned with free markets and objective reality. It's kind of a physics-based by energy, and everybody can know that perfectly well, but choose to live in a perceived reality that's different. If they're living in the perceived reality from that world, things are going to get worse.
I was just going to ask Jeff, just back to the nation state adoption and sort of sovereign game theory element. In your view, what causes the flip? Because I think there's natural biases, right? Like if you exert a certain amount of control over the fiat system, it's hard to rationalize moving to a different system. But like as Saylor says, the first country to just print as much currency as they can and just buy Bitcoin ultimately wins. I guess why hasn't that happened yet? Is it just those inherent biases that you're actually killing the system that you actually have power in today? And then, it's I think Matt Pines has said, at this point, the gun is kind of on the table proverbially. It's in the zeitgeist that this is a reserve asset, but no one's picked up the gun and just said, I'm printing a ton of money to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, and so I don't see it. I know some people do see it as a reserve asset. I see it as a protocol that's imposing a new reality. So as a asset, you see it as a part of an existing system. Mm-hmm. Well, that part of the existing system is an inflationary monetary system that we've always lived in. That's actually why I specifically call that out. These two are completely different systems. it could only be a reserve asset if it gets captured. And by capturing it, everybody agrees to the new rules of the capture. I don't think that that's very logical to assume with what's happening on Bitcoin and how the nodes drive consensus. I don't think that. I think what will happen is, if that happens, the Bitcoin will fork, and you'll have a U.S. coin and real Bitcoin. And so this is always outside the system as a reserve asset. You would assume it's inside the system.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Maybe you'll help me finish this because I can't fully articulate it, but it's a symptom of what you're describing. It's I don't know who coined it, but I don't know if you've heard of the term Nakamoto point. It's effectively when global energy production
Yep.
it gets split evenly 50% to just natural energy production, the other 50% to power the Bitcoin network. And it's this idea, if you go back from energy production, has naturally had some hop between an inefficient scale, usually either gold or the petrodollar. And that's what causes all the different, ramifications across global conflicts and just what we see today. And that's an example of, like, once you don't have that inefficiency, that game, you can't really actually even, you can only get close to squint and what it's going to look like, but you don't necessarily know what it looks like. And that's kind of this point of, it's a positive sum game, because you're either selling your energy to the Bitcoin network or you're directly selling it to the asset that is non-controllable. There's no hop. And that brings an efficiency that we've never seen in global markets for something as integral as energy.
Yeah. So measure. There's, by the way, there's a whole bunch of these things that are left outstanding by the conflict of people trying to integrate Bitcoin to their previous model. Like, it's everywhere. So mining rewards. I need to make more from JPEGs on the thing because people need to pay. I need to, in the year 2140, I need to have enough transactions to pay for the network. 2140. And the further out you go on a totally different model that's exponential in nature, exponential productivity, productivity gains means exponential deflation. And so by 2140, if you actually lived in this world, look at the energy prices in Bitcoin today, straight down. You're seeing abundance. You're seeing prices of everything falling. What do you think they're going to do by 2140? As you build an entirely new energy infrastructure powered by Bitcoin, you decentralize energy all around the world, and you explode energy. The energy prices will keep coming down, and the amount of that you'll need to secure this, it'll be the exact same ratio today in 2135. Right? But people are using a fiat mindset to be able to say, what do I need in fiat to be able to pay for my mining equipment and energy and everything else? Because in fiat, the energy prices are going up. And so these all of these ideas that are, they arise from trying to pull into a different system, an entirely different system that's imposing a new reality to your other system. And I see those breaks everywhere. They're interesting to talk about, but they're literally everywhere.
How does gold factor into that? Maybe with some of the recent, this has been the past 6 months, generally past 50 years, but past 6 months we've seen kind of gold, specifically in Shanghai markets, but in general with the price. How do you see that factoring into, like, I don't want to call it the canary in the coal mine, but sending a signal of the world's trying to figure out a different model, and obviously gold naturally has its limitations.
Yeah, so we have kind of 5,000 years of human history on gold working. The gold always gets centralized or broken, and if you're a central bank wanting to buy more gold, you're going to default to your previous reality and say, okay, I can fix it with gold, because then if you had enough gold, you could change the rules. Of course, gold will look like that. And then you have this new protocol that doesn't care what you think, right? So gold priced in Bitcoin will fall just like all other things fall, but it'll appear to a fiat world and a lot of people will do that, it'll appear because it matches their expectations of what should happen, even though it can't happen because gold always gets centralized. It'll match that. If gold worked, then we'd still be using gold. Right? If gold it worked to actually have a global free market, we'd still be using gold. It doesn't work.
Yeah, the way I perceive it is that there's at least a recognition at the individual level, right? So we recognize it at an individual level that you need to step outside of the system. And for me, it was to measure or adopt Bitcoin as really my barometer. My barometer for not necessarily even wealth, but just like, I guess, measuring things over time. And so the way I perceive gold in this case is that there's a recognition by other countries that the fiat system is becoming increasingly fragile. It's increasingly weaponized against them. And so to your point, Jeff, they're trying to go back to a system that maybe was more fair because gold, there's no country that can just mint gold out of thin air. There's a lot of energy and resources that go into extracting the metal. And so I at least recognize that to be, well, this system that is being weaponized against us outside of the U.S. and even, I mean, certainly you could make the case in the United States is being weaponized against the people of the United States too, because they're getting destroyed by inflation. But at least I think now gold is being perceived less as a trade or less as like an investment at the sovereign level and more so a survival mechanism. And so I almost think that the next step from there, and again, it could be slow to your point earlier, the next step from there would be, well, gold is no longer allowing us to survive. Bitcoin is the new system that allows us to survive.
I totally agree with that, and that's probably that's like at the sovereign level. That is absolutely what's happening, because people see it still as a store of value against manipulating currencies. So of course it would look like that, and I think there's many people, especially older generation, that still see it like that instead of Bitcoin because they haven't done the work on Bitcoin. So it would make sense that as we moved through this, lots of people would see themselves in gold. And do that, and gold would protect the state in that matter, protect the size of the state because it can still be manipulated. So if you were China and you had a dictatorship, a control structure, you couldn't allow the free market to work. You couldn't allow Bitcoin because it removes the control structure. So now if you're the US and both China and Russia have gaining a whole bunch of gold, buying more gold, would you want to revalue your currency to gold or to Bitcoin? So, and this gets into some of the game theory that I think we're playing out right now. And so what the U.S. will probably try to do with stable coins. I love, by the way, one of my favorite things is monikers like the Federal Reserve that isn't federal and has no reserves, right? Or Patriot Act, or stable coins. They're all the exact opposite of what they actually are. Because all a stable coin is a guaranteed loss coin. It loses value at the exact same rate as the US dollar. But lots of people around the world think the US dollar, and not think, they're right to think the US dollar is a better store of value than their own currency. So if you give them a stable coin, they will fund your debt by holding your guaranteed loss coin, right? And so it makes perfect sense why the U.S. would try to integrate stablecoins into an inflationary monetary system to drive the debt and drive essentially the U.S. dollar stronger through that structure, because there's a whole bunch of 195 other nations that have weaker currencies that are failing all the time, and they will fund it.
It's a great point, because at the end of the day, those in power in the U.S. as the reserve currency recognize that there is declining trust in the dollar. Now, that doesn't mean, like some people perceive that to mean the dollar goes away next year. I mean, people have been saying that for a very long time. They'll continue to be
Totally.
wrong on that. And so if I'm picking up what you're putting down is that, and I agree, is like, if you take a look at all of these reserve assets, right? If we step into the shoes of policymakers, high level leaders, executives within the United States government, they are looking at what options do I have to continue to exert power over the money? How do I continue to get people to purchase our debt, keep confidence in the dollar? And so you look at the toolkit and you have stable coins as a way to soak up more dollar demand because, Jeff, to your point, the stable coin or would you say guaranteed loss of purchase?
Guaranteed loss coin.
Yeah. Is still better than a lot of options that people have in other countries. And then you look at gold. Well, gold historically has given people confidence in currencies backed by gold, and then we totally went away from that. And so if you're able to get to a point of accumulating gold or something like Bitcoin, and so ultimately, at least how I perceive this is that the United States recognizes that their adversaries have been strategically acquiring gold over certainly the past decade, but even at a more rapid clip the past 3 or 4 years. And I do think that there's an acknowledgement that Bitcoin, it's less about, hey, we like Bitcoin as this alternative system that totally derails or destroys our power that we have over our people. It's less about that, and it's more so, well, maybe Bitcoin, we have a strategic advantage as a country to acquire more of that, if that is going to allow us to extend the longevity of the system we have today.
Yep. And it's integrated into stable coins. So, of course, this is going to happen, right? And it's going to be a big part of the world. And from that system, you just have imperialism 3.0. If Bitcoin isn't used as a currency around the world, you would just have a new set of leaders on top of a system that was still just as broken. That would be in stable coins that was driving the same output. It won't look like that because that creates more and more instability in the system. But if you just imagine that world, which you could say some policy advisors stuck into today's reality would want, because what they're thinking is, how do we stop China? And we're going to do everything, but some of these actions actually make your own system weaker as well, and lead you to war because all of these things inside a framework of the existing system, monetary system, where prices always go up, they have to centralize.
Just a quick break. If you're enjoying the episode, please leave us a like, a comment, subscribe to our page if you haven't done so already, or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, a 5-star rating really goes a long way. The short of it is, it takes time to run a podcast, to reach out to guests like Jeff, get them scheduled, prepare for an episode, record it, edit it, and so on. So if you could take a few seconds, like, comment, subscribe, it really helps to grow the show. It helps get our message out to more people who may need to hear it, and I really appreciate it. I'll try to respond to every comment. And so if you leave a comment, good. If you leave a comment, bad, and you'll provide feedback on how we can improve the show, I'll also take that into consideration as well. So thanks again for being here. I appreciate it.
I think one of the big things that gets discounted across the board is what you were referencing in the personal change. And it sounds soft or like ideological, but it's rooted in pragmatism of, if you have a better form of money, you'll naturally want it. But people get caught up in deflation and Bitcoin's price appreciation, and nobody will want to use it or spend it. But the reality is, and I had this discussion deeply about if there was some kind of global collapse and Bitcoin skyrocketed, but nobody would spend it. It's just not rooted in practicality, because it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And the way I acknowledged or discussed it was, it doesn't actually matter what you want to spend. If you want a cow or you want oil or whatever it is, if they don't, they're not going to accept anything other than that. And so you're going to have to spend it. And similar with war, or somebody going to, protect a sovereign or your just personal, city, if you can't fund them, then they will not, if they accept Bitcoin and you do not participate in, economic activity transfer, they will not work on your behalf. And that's the thing that I think gets missed across the board as the price appreciates, it's not in a vacuum.
I spend every day. I buy and replace, right? Spend and replace. And I spend every day. Why? Because I want to give an incentive to the world that I want to create. There's lots of people like me. And what ends up happening, so if you just think about just the structure of markets, free markets, today, if you're in the US, you're probably, every business is spending at least 2.5-3% on fees to take money in a money that's losing money. Every business. I'm paying somebody else like Visa, MasterCard, to the bank through 2.5% on every transaction to pay somebody in the middle to take fees on money that's losing money. If you go into other regions around the world, they might be paying 5, 7, 10% to take fees in money that's losing money faster. And then you enter in Bitcoin on Lightning or Liquid or some, and there's virtually no fees in money that's not losing money. What do you think businesses are going to start doing? Right? Business, and by the way, this is happening because I can see it in our portfolio. I can see how fast this is growing. It's growing faster than the internet. But of course it is. And where is it growing the most? It's growing in areas where the fees are really high and money's losing money faster. And so what would people do in a market like that? They would move to what's more efficient. What would the businesses do? I want to get more Bitcoin. And I'm going to give a discount because I can give a discount to the purchaser in Bitcoin. And the market just moves. And by the time people realize what's happened, it's already there.
Yeah, it's such a good point, and it ultimately is about meeting people where they're at. Because while we've talked a lot about this just being a totally different system, and you don't want to measure one system from another, the reality is that that's how it's going to be for a while before people can fully accept the new reality, right? And so, if you are a business, adopting Bitcoin as a strategic reserve on your balance sheet, while that, to your point, Jeff, is an acknowledgement that this is just part of the other system that you currently live in, that's at least going to allow your business to potentially survive into the future for the next system, right? Because Brian and we did a podcast a month ago, and so I cited in that podcast that there was a family business that closed down local to me after about 50 years of being in business, and it was really sad for the community. It's been a staple, but they cited just rising costs across the board for their food as a restaurant, for their labor. And so as a business in this case, right, you have three choices. You either just devalue the quality of their product, which they said in this article they didn't want to do. They said that they would not be able to continue to operate the business and provide the same level of quality and service to their customers that they have for the past 2 or 3 generations. So that's one option, is you make your product worse, right? And that's dishonest. Or you raise the prices, but your customers are likely facing the same problem that you are, and they may not be able to stomach those higher prices. And then the third is, well, you just make less money, and then maybe you go out of business. You have less margins. You're not increasing you're not increasing your prices in line with the cost. And so while I hear you on the fact that these are two different systems, I guess what I'm trying to convey to those that'll listen to this is you have to there's still a progression, right? There's stepping stones here in terms of, if you're a business or an individual, you may only be able to make it if you start to at least denominate your life in Bitcoin, or I would even argue in gold, right? I mean, we're focused on Bitcoin, but I thought there was a really interesting chart a few weeks ago from Luke Groman where he denominated the S&P 500 returns over the past 50 years in dollars versus gold, and it's a flat line in gold, right?
Exactly.
Remarkable.
Mind you, just carry that two thoughts. You're exactly right. Every business should have some Bitcoin on their balance sheet. It's almost an imperative. Every human being needs to have Bitcoin on their personal balance sheet, because the same is true for every one of us. Instead of the money losing value, the money's essentially acting in the free market, and all prices are falling against it. So you can offer more services. You can deliver more to your customers. You can expand from a different mindset, an entirely different world that gets you off of of rat wheel that you have no control over. And so from that rat wheel, if you look at private equity, just going in and just with debt that is almost zero and going in and levering companies, it's so broken, it's so distorted the incentives of the world. Because if you're really big and you can play that game, you can just destroy companies and play financial engineering, get out, and you don't care if the company fails. Do it again and again and again. And you look at the nature of family businesses, long-held family businesses that were society pillars. They're all getting broken because of exactly what we're saying, right? Out of the other system. So I have a lot of empathy for family businesses or businesses that are trying to deliver value, and they don't know what's happening. They're trying to deliver value, and it's getting harder and harder and harder to deliver value. They're working tirelessly on a treadmill that's getting further and further away from them, and they don't know what to do. Right. And all they need to do is move some of their energy into the new system. And it works exactly inverse to the other system. It gets better. They're carrying forward, why would the S&P be flat in gold? It's because there's still inflation in gold. Remember, the natural state of the free market is deflation. S&P 500 should be falling. It should be the value the value of that in a hard currency. So when Elon or the besties talk about the productivity miracle that's coming from AI, and that's going to solve our debt, it's crazy to me that people are saying this. Smart people are saying this because it actually makes the problem worse. Because the productivity miracle is faster deflation. I don't know a business. I'm involved in tons of businesses that aren't removing labor with people with AI. And if they don't, no one will use their service because the service won't be competitive.
Yeah, this is
Right?
oh, sorry.
It's crazy. It's crazy that people are measuring that system that they're a part of, and they will only use the things that are providing them more value, from a system that's wired exactly the opposite, that steals all that from them. And then they're complaining about those other people, right? When it's them.
Yeah, I would be curious your thoughts on. I'll have to send this to you afterwards because we shared it. It came out about a year ago. We have our venture fund. I think it's still today the only Bitcoin denominated venture fund, and we had a white paper breaking down a lot of these concepts. And why I'm bringing it up here is because this is actually where, from a venture perspective, I'm most excited because for 5 years I've been focused on this industry and there's a lot of opportunity. But where I really see the main opportunity, especially for economic, value to be returned to ourselves and LPs, is on all the other inefficient markets that when people like yourself and myself and individuals listening, and that's where I appreciate you taking the time to share this message because I know you don't have to, is when they realize this, there's generally, I call it the carrot and then the stick. The carrot is they try to get their company to get more efficient. They try to get them to adopt Bitcoin. But because they've been storing their personal balance sheet in a better form of money, they have increased optionality. And then the stick is like, okay, I'm out. And now I'm going to go run back the playbook. Because if you look at just the publicly traded companies, think about how much inefficiency, forget about like Bitcoin and AI, just from a SaaS-based perspective, how many still are leveraging old tools versus just new software. And so the point being is not only are they able to understand where their bodies are buried and rebuild that business more efficiently with the tools, but they can start to graft on other things they've seen worked. But if they have a Bitcoin balance sheet and they have that lens of efficiency that we're talking about here, they're going to outrun everyone else. And just by nature of those markets being the largest, if they sweep that capital into BTC, they're going to, you think about like one part of the piece was everyone's a Bitcoin miner. Google and Apple are some of the best examples when you think about free cash flows on an annualized basis. Now, it doesn't have to be at that scale, but that's what I personally get excited about because like the Bitcoin space, and it's growing and it'll grow and it's very fast. But you think about all the other economic activity that's coordinated, that's inefficient. Once somebody comes at it through this lens and sweeps it into BTC, those will be some of the best revenue generating companies in the world.
Yeah, but the structure of all of these companies that people know as companies, they're going to, in the next 10 years, the chaos that's coming. What people, if you if you're at the front edge of AI right now and you see how we do things, we work really well through the division of labor, right? And because we become experts in something. Right now, most people are using these giant LLMs, but the tiny little things, the experts are moving into agents, and they're free, and they're better than the LLM at a narrow task. Now you can string together a whole bunch of narrow tasks. Because think of anything you do, anything. If you can teach it to somebody else, you can teach it to an agent. Now string together a whole bunch of these agents, a swarm of them, that's doing just about anything. And you can see the structure of companies that today that we use won't look like that tomorrow. Right? If they don't change, then a new company is going to take all of the business because it's going to be able to do it for 10 times cheaper, and you'll use the new company. And so when I say that prices fall to the marginal cost of production, and the marginal cost of production of AI is zero, that's what I'm talking about. And then it gets merged with robotics. And then it gets, so all of the physical tasks that we think about doing and everything else, they move into this realm too, and they start falling at that price. That's actually what Bitcoin's measuring, that productivity. And so now carry that on to, so a different, and I've said this many times, but imagine if you're in Venezuela for the last 20 years, and you just held US dollars. You would be protected from the massive depreciation of the currency, and you would have more wealth than all of your other neighbors by just holding it. Now imagine a different scenario. You're in Venezuela and you create a US denominated dollar business, and you're accruing more US dollars. That would look very different than the person just holding US dollars, right? Now just go to Bitcoin and say, that's the exact same thing where everybody's playing with right now. And there's people holding Bitcoin dollars, and they're going to do really well. But what if you could create businesses that were creating more Bitcoin on your balance sheet? And what you're doing is you're advancing a new world, a new idea, and you're getting paid really well by it. Because it's almost venture returns on top of a venture asset, because everyone today lives in Venezuela. They just don't know it. Right? When we look at countries like Venezuela and what's happened, how they trended to either go to socialism or complete control, right? A dictatorship. This is what typically that path looks like. And they can't see the same things happening in the US too, right? Because it's a relative devaluation rather than, and so they look at other cultures and they look at other people. How did those people fall into that trap when they are in the trap?
Jeff, I'm curious. I know we're coming up on time, but I would love to. I think at the start of the show, you said that this is played out exactly as you had expected in your book 6 years ago. I'm curious if you can give us like a forward-looking. What do the next 6 years look like? Less so on the debt side. I think we all know where that goes in terms of exponential growth in debt and money supply. But what, since you've been an entrepreneur, you've been in technology a long time, what can you share with us? What can we expect on the technology side? What do the next 6 years look like in terms of disruption there?
AI right now is the worst it'll ever be by a staggering amount. I'm talking to people that 6 months ago thought it was a toy in coding, and that 5% of their energy would go into an idea, and then 95% would be coding the idea. The 95% is now all AI. And now all of the time is expanding ideas. And these things expand and expand on top of themselves. So if you're in that, the rate of this, it's moving so much faster than people realize. And it touches everything. And so not just in one area, these things turn into, they'll drive better health outcomes. They'll drive better outcomes everywhere. But it is breaking. And by the way, the same AI is being used through Palantir and others and every media organization to have you believe something that's not true. And people are stuck in that same nonsense. Like Twitter is just mostly bots today. People are interacting with these bots like it's a person, learning from these bots that wants it to believe this other thing, that there's some evil enemy on the other side, right? And they're buying it, and they're getting more and more mad. So it's breaking society. And so, would I expect that to change? No, I'd expect it to get worse. Right? That doesn't. But you don't have to. If you actually go deep in here and understand how these tools would both be positive or could be used against you, you can remove yourself from this chaos. You can measure from a new system and just expect all of these things to happen, and not get. Because remember, I like to say this: fear is a giant way to control people. Right? Just think of all of the things that where a government would use fear or a false flag or something else to be able to change the rules of society and gain more control. Happens all the time. Right? So fear is a massive control bitch. Hope is stronger. So if you live in hope and you're living in the other system, and you don't give your path to the fear, you're almost immune from it. But that's why it's so. Why I say chaotic though is if you individually are listening to this, or Jackson, Michael, Brent, if you're individually, you can feel it in your own world, right? The things you care about, your family, and these things. When the killing just happened the other day, just it's entire you just get sucked into the vortex, right? And that vortex is going to get worse. So try to hold on to what's real, what's in that, and don't give into it, because it's designed to keep you paralyzed.
Yeah, and it's a real paradox and feedback loop of either negative or positive, because if you reference and you've had a lot of discussions, you'll probably remember or think about the big eye-opening point for a lot of individuals was 2020, but they'll say that it's the money printer and the amount of debt, but it really wasn't that. It was that they got off the rat race because everyone got locked in a box, so they had time.
Yep.
And most people don't have time because they're on the negative feedback loop of trying to make ends meet. And so to your point, you, myself, and individuals on this podcast, and probably some listening, if you bought into this new system, and it's just having a better form of money, it affords you to get off the rat race and just think critically about what's happening. But it's very hard for individuals to do that. And so you're ultimately going in the other direction. And so that's why it's so imperative to just be able to understand where Bitcoin's, again, it's a lot of these things sound a little ephemeral when we say networks and others. It's just like once you have a better form of storing your value and economic output, everything else just gets a lot easier.
Yeah. And then have a whole bunch of empathy for people who are still stuck, because they don't know if they're stuck. Their life is really getting worse. They're scared. They're not going to say the exact reason they're scared. But and then some in Bitcoin says, have fun staying poor, which is just so outrageous, right? It's coming from a position of fear, and you can't move to somebody from fear to more fear.
Maybe
So I just say every one of us had to go through the same process in our understanding, and had to deconstruct a whole bunch of lies that we were told and a whole bunch of knowledge that we knew. So why wouldn't that look the same for every single person in the world that's going through it? It's almost I find it ludicrous that we get to this spot that now we know, but we think everyone else should know tomorrow.
Yeah, one thing I want to call out before we wrap is so Jeff, founding partner at Ego Death, recently announced a $100 million plus raise. So very big congratulations, because raising money is not easy. But even more congratulations for, it takes a lot of work to stick your neck out in day-to-day output to invest monetary resources in the old system to come into the new system. Because that's personally how I got into venture, was just realizing if you have the network and the groups and they're willing to put up capital, it's very hard. It traditionally was insanely hard back in 2020. It's still today to focus solely on Bitcoin and raise capital in that framing. And so just curious, anything you want to share there, or just in general, like what's the most exciting things you're looking at from a just venture perspective moving forward?
So it's been the easiest thing. And this is it's actually, I pinch myself how easy it's been by sticking my neck out and stating what I wanted to do, and where I thought the world was going and how I could help bend the world to that spot. It's amazing how many people are aligned. Like even if they're stuck, right? Even if they're stuck right now, the more and more they listen, the more and more they're aligned. The capital raising, honestly, Michael, it was crazy easy. The first one was harder because we were just getting started, and we had FTX that collapsed in the middle of it. But even then, if I look back at how capital raising normally is, it's pretty easy. And then we had remarkable success out of that first fund, and the second one was really easy. It's like everything's getting easier.
Well, if you're listening to this, don't start a venture fund, because I promise you it's not easy. It's easy for Jeff because not everyone's as eloquent in explaining what's happening here. But if somebody leaves and goes starts a venture fund, I can promise you it's probably not going to be as easy as Jeff. But I do hear you there that, and I get what you're saying, like in the sense of the people that do deeply understand there's something wrong, they feel the moral imperative to participate. It's the joke of, in the fiat world, it's like, who will build the roads? It's like, we'll build the roads because we need our kids to get to school in a pretty, efficient fashion. But the state will want you to believe that we need them to help build the roads or produce, when we can figure this stuff out ourselves. And it sounds like you're doing a great job of it.
Yeah, it's super fun on the company side too. It's hard to say what one I'm most excited about, because in venture something will change, or we have a curveball and such. But there are so many portcos just killing it inside the portfolio, and are going to make huge advances to this protocol on different layers that add privacy, add ability to transact privately, to all of these things that are required for Bitcoin to emerge as what we're talking about. And they are already impossible to stop. They've already been, and so not just that, but it's so wild to be a part of seeing this and working with entrepreneurs, kind of helping them drive their dreams and what this looks like. So we're doing diligence right now on 7 deals. Right now, that all 7 could close in the next 45 days, and we get told that there's no deals here. Now, this is a Series A fund, so many of these companies are already profitable at growing at crazy rates. And if you talk to the general community and so they're adding Bitcoin to the balance sheets already, they don't need the capital. And so to be doing these types of deals at the same time most of the world is saying there's nothing happening here, is okay.
I love it.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy, and it's really a pleasure to have you on the show today. And for anyone who does want to get in touch, where should we send them to?
I'm not on Twitter anymore, so I'm just on Nostr. But I just ask. So probably my website, jeffbooth.ca. And the reason I say that is if you're following me on social media, make sure it's me. There's so many scammers out there, and so if I ever change my NPub on Nostr or something like that, I'll update my website to make sure that people can double check.
Excellent. Thanks again, Jeff.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. If you found the information valuable, please share the episode with a friend or leave a rating on your favorite podcast app. All the links we discussed in today's show will be in the show notes inside your podcast app. Before we finish, a quick reminder that OnRamp Media is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment or legal advice. Regardless of where you are on your Bitcoin journey, we'd love to hear from you. Visit onrampbitcoin.com/contact to schedule a consultation with one of our private client advisors.